Sure. We're doing it first read.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Please take your seats so we can get started. All right. Is everyone ready to go? All right. I believe before we begin, Councilman Druso, you want to make a statement?
Yeah, we're calling the Board of Review into session right now. A couple of different things. We've got a number of emails and phone calls about what the council can and cannot do. I want to note a few things. First, Mr. Aguiar noted the assessor has already certified the tax rolls. That was done on September 29th. So that is not within our authority to do. What the Board of Review's role is to provide due process to appellants who have properly contested their property assessments. We do not have the ability. And then Mr. Swenzik will explain a little bit more legally and also the legal repercussions, but we do not have the legal authority to outright reject the rolls. So I've said that already, so it was a little surprising to get that many things. There's one other thing I want to note too, for people listening at home or taking notes or on social media about this. The council submitted a letter on July 24th, 2023 to all the other taxing entities saying it would not roll the millages forward. That is what is within our power. And we did that months ago to try and provide relief to homeowners, to renters, to people to know that we're going to do our part to control costs within our power. As of now, the only two entities that have affirmatively responded to the council to say that they are not rolling forward are the library and the downtown development district. So I want to get that very much on the record, because having lived this 4 years ago and understanding people's frustration with rising costs, with increased interest rates, with higher homeowners insurance, the council knows that people are burdened. And the thing that is absolutely within our legal authority, we are going to do and control to make sure that taxpayers are taken care of. And the things that are outside of our legal duty, there should not be a straw man argument for what we cannot control. Mr. Swenzik, is there anything that I missed or that you'd like to add to that?
Council member, can I interrupt and call the roll so we can convene?
You can please do that.
We have council member and board members Jeruso, Harris, Moreno, Morel, and Green here. We have 5 members and a quorum.
Thank you.
Council members, when the assessments were released a couple of months ago, the council was very public in voicing its concern and committed publicly and privately to using all of the legal steps that were available to it to try and do something to help out Orleans Parish taxpayers who were affected by the assessments. So this is something that we have been looking at for a very long time. Very early on in that process, we zeroed in on today's certification vote as a potential avenue to try and do something to influence the assessments. I have looked at the Louisiana Revised Statutes, Title 47. I have talked to the folks at the Louisiana Tax Commission, to their lawyers, and based on the totality of that research, my conversations with them, I do not think that refusing to certify today is a viable solution. Your role as the Board of Review for Orleans Parish is not to engage in a general referendum on the quality of the assessor or the quality of his assessments. You do not have the legal authority to make general statements and to reject them outright. Your role is much more narrow. It's limited to considering specific appeals for specific properties where a taxpayer has timely filed an appeal. And the law is very clear that your duty in that regard is mandatory. It is a shall, it's not a may. I think a helpful comparison just for the public, and I'm not trying to draw any moral equivalency, but I think it's very accurate. The argument that we can somehow defeat assessments we don't like by not certifying them today is very much like the argument that you could defeat the 2020 presidential election by refusing to certify the Electoral College results. This is a non-discretionary duty. It's something that we call a ministerial duty. A vote in favor of certification is not a vote in favor of the underlying tax rolls. It's simply something that we're required to do. If we do not certify the rolls today, I want to flag a couple of negative consequences. The first is that we are almost certain to end up in litigation, filed either by the assessor or by some other party. They would almost undoubtedly, since we have a shall duty, a mandatory duty, file a writ of mandamus, which is what you do when a public body fails to do something it's required to do. And I don't think that the city would have any legal defense in that proceeding. So all it would do is delay the inevitable. By delaying the inevitable, we also have a number of potentially serious and adverse consequences on the city budgeting process. As you know, our budget is based largely on tax revenue, and our timeline to adopt the budget is incredibly tight under the charter because of the unique way that Orleans Parish assesses its taxes. Between now and December 1st, we have to introduce, we have to advertise, we have to consider, we have to adopt a more than $1 billion budget. And if we throw the entire process into limbo, we create a very real possibility that we're not able to pass the budget in the time that the charter requires. Finally, if you elect today not to certify in a symbolic show of support for everyone, you create a very real risk to the people you can actually help today, because your certification vote locks in the adjustments that you will make for taxpayers who have appropriately and timely filed their appeals. And if you don't certify it, you certainly put them in limbo and you arguably put them in jeopardy. So I've looked at this as in every way that it can be looked. I see nothing but potential legal risk and virtually no benefit.
Thank you. Can I maybe ask one question to the other point? If we don't certify and nothing is collected, that would also risk homeowners and other people of not having to pay their taxes as normal. And so you may have to pay, pick a number, $5,000 that you owe in 2023 and in September or October, and then $5,000 again in January. So it's almost like you're being double taxed because everything has been so prolonged.
Nothing is certain but death and taxes, and you're right.
Thank you. Does any other colleague want to
quick
make a
point.
statement?
One, just as you stated, and I want to reiterate this because it's very important. This is the window for us to hear and grant relief in the appeals process.
Correct.
If we do not act today and that appeal process elapses, and eventually we are required, as we are required by law, that these rolls are certified, those individuals who went through all the effort to get a reduction, their window to have relief has passed.
That is the very real risk. Yes, sir.
The second point I'd like to make, I also have studied the law, and it would certainly appear that even without action, it contemplates that since the assessor has already certified the rolls by default without challenging within the challenge period, the assessments don't change anyway. So at the end of whatever proceeding we have, at the end of whatever is going to occur, the assessments will remain the assessments. But there are two things I'd like to note to people, especially those who are homeowners. Everything when it comes to your mortgage, your escrow, it's all mechanical, like a clockwork process. If we do not collect, we do not certify the rolls, if taxes are not collected timely, it is very likely, like you said, that in January or February, when it's resolved, there will be chaos when mortgage companies are sent bills for 2 years of taxes. And then they go back to homeowners and go, well, mechanically, we had this amount set aside, they're asking for this amount, so now we have to bump up your escrow to acknowledge the fact that now we have a new bill from the city that has double the amount. Now, practically speaking, it's not double, it's the past year and the current year, but it's not the way the banking and mortgage industry work. Once we become an outlier, once there is a hiccup in that process, it will create absolute chaos for people who are paying their taxes inside of a mortgage structure. And that's something also to consider. Does anyone else want to make a comment before we hear the?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment to make sure that we don't have misinformation. An email went out that said the New Orleans City Council has scheduled a vote today that will raise our housing costs. Is that in fact what we are voting on today? Will anything that we're doing today assume an increase in housing costs?
That's completely inaccurate.
Completely inaccurate.
Yeah, the millage amounts have automatically rolled back, so there's conceivably no change, but that's incorrect.
Right. It's also assumed that other agencies will roll their millages forward, but they haven't yet done so. And the public has an opportunity to go to those agencies, the Sewage and Water Board, the Board of Liquidation, City Debt, the Lakefront Management Authority, and ask them to not roll forward their millages. Is that option on the table?
That option is certainly on the table, and the question of the amount of the millage, roll back, roll forward, is just not before us today.
So the fact that assessments have increased by 23% does not mean that taxes will increase at all or by 23%.
Absolutely correct.
These are laws, and misinformation that is provided by certain organizations must be addressed. Now, if they mention my name as they did, suggesting that I have said there is no need to panic, it is correct. There is no need to panic because there are organizations who can be approached to be asked to keep their taxes in place right now. The law provides for that option. But the bottom line is that no one today on this council is voting to increase housing costs. And you have confirmed that, and I don't have to be redundant about it. But anyone who comes with that information or provides it to the public is providing misinformation and must be held accountable.
All right, Mr. Spivey, with all of that out of the way, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, council members. My name is Scott Spivey. I'm here on behalf of Hammerman and Gaynor. And we appreciate the opportunity to perform the services as the Orleans Parish Property Tax Appeals Assessment Appeal Hearings Management Program. This was a very large year. This is a quick summary of the past years that we've been participating. Last year, when I spoke to you, I said that there were 680 appeals. This year, there were almost 10 times that amount. These are the results that I've had forwarded to y'all. And you can see here, after there were withdrawals and settlements, there was a grand total of 5,978 appeals. The numbers for District A, 1,482, District B, 1,946, District C, 1,063, District D, 977, District
Thank
E,
you.
508.
Thank you, ma'am.
The recommended reduction is a total of 121,637,360 for the assessed change, which represents a total of a 16.65% reduction. And applying that to the parish-wide property total tax roll, that's a total change of 2.128%. This is just a quick slide showing past years. Last year, again, there was a 20% reduction. The year before that, a 7.5% year before, and then there's a pre-IDA and post-IDA and the years previous. All appeals were scheduled to allow the appellant to appear by Zoom video or telephone conference or in person. The venue for the in-person appeal hearings were scheduled for Delgado Student Life Center, City Park Campus, Building 23. Hearings were conducted from September 12th through September 29th for the in-person hearings. And just because of volume and needs to reschedule and so forth, they were continued through October 6th via Zoom, video, or telephone conference hearings. Notices were sent to everyone, all the appellants, in many different forms in an attempt to ensure that everyone found out. Again, just large volume in a short amount of time. This includes emails from both our standard website as well as a Gmail account we have scheduled, a letter saying that they could go to the website to look at their schedule, as well as a letter telling them the exact time and date of their hearing. Texts were sent to everyone and calls were made to all appellants who had not responded, telling us their preference. More particularly, we asked them, would they prefer to appear in person by video, telephone conference, or would they like to have the hearing conducted with no oral hearing, reviewing the documents that they had provided? So naturally, if they responded, we knew that they had heard from us. If they had not responded, we gave them direct calls. Once the hearings were scheduled and they let us know what kind of hearings they would like, they were given the opportunity to go to the website, orleanstaxappeal.com, and look up their date and time of their hearing, allow them to click to join the Zoom meeting or to call in, and all of the hearings were conducted. Some note for some significant numbers, just added this slide showing that there were a very large number of commercial reductions. And in District B in particular were some of the largest reductions, as you can see. One of the reasons for the large commercial reduction had a lot to do with the fact that a lot of these commercial properties work with the assessor to ensure that the assessor has all of the incomes necessary to do the income approach. And just because of the time that was involved, some of the assessor representatives were receiving those numbers for the first time at the appeal. So as the way it was explained to me is the initial certification was based upon a pro forma assessment, but once real numbers were actually seen at the hearing, the assessor rep and the appellant representative or the appellant were given the opportunity to discuss real numbers and therefore make what appear to be very, very large reductions. But everyone was in agreement that this was appropriate once the income, the actual income was demonstrated to the assessor rep. The general guidelines, the hearing examiner does not tell the appellant or the assessor reps the recommended property values. So up until today, no values have been told to any of the appellants. No-show hearings are administratively processed. Every effort is made to provide options for attending, phone-in hearing, alternate schedules, etc. Over the past 11 years, attendance status has had no statistical significant effect on the success of the appeal. That is to say, all of the evidence presented to the hearing officer was reviewed, was given the same amount of time and consideration as if an appellant had appeared in person. The tax appeal toll-free number was available 24/7 and will remain so throughout the year. Updates are provided to the council fiscal office at least weekly, and other updates were made as needed and requested. Now, after today, once the final determination is made by the Board of Review, a hearing determination letter will be sent to all appellants. The hearing determinations are sent by a trackable U.S. Postal Service mail per Louisiana Tax Commission guidelines. And this is an example of the letter that's given. A noteworthy change is that up until this year, it's always been within 10 calendar days, the appellant had to respond. And noticing the change in the law also announced at the Louisiana Tax Commission website, the appellant will now have 30 days from the date of the earlier of either receiving the written decision, for example, on the website, which will be available, or actual delivery of the letter. Subsequent to the hearing today, after the council certifies the results of the hearings, we will continue to work closely with the Louisiana Tax Commission to ensure that all the appellant's information is presented to the LTC, verify that the appellants received the determination letters and the dates they were received, respond to questions about reasoning evaluation, and continue to improve the appeals process. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Spivey. Does anybody have any comments on the dais? So we have 2 comment cards. Ms. Morris, Ms. LeBlanc.
Hello, my name is Leah LeBlanc. I work with the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance and Housing NOLA. We are calling on the New Orleans City Council to leverage their power as Board of Review to not certify the 2024 quadrennial assessment and kick it back to the assessor's office. We are speaking on behalf of over 1,000 residents who signed our petition urging the council to stand up against unfair property assessments. You should have all received the petition before this meeting. We know that a legislative audit has been requested by the council. Last time an audit was conducted, very little change, and the fact that another audit is being requested shows that you do not believe that the quadrennial assessment was conducted in good faith. Please vote no on this resolution.
Anybody else to comment? Ms. Morris?
Good morning. My name is Andrenica Morris. I'm president and chair of the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance. I would like the opportunity to take this time to address one of the comments that was made. We have checked our email server. Our emails did not go out saying that housing costs would absolutely be raised with today's vote. So we would push back on Councilmember Green's assertion that we said exactly those words. We're not sure what email he is referring to. Someone may have forwarded an email to him and used that language, but that email did not come from our organization. We are also glad to hear that the council has explored these options about what this choice means today. And while legal counsel does urge and recommend that you do not take it, we are also pushing back on the notion that you don't have a choice today and you are not certifying today. Legal counsel said very clearly, you will be certifying today. That you believe that certification is one that you must undertake, that you shall undertake, despite the fact that you have buttons in front of you that say yes or no, you will be making a choice. And even if legal counsel feels that there will be backlash and that you will eventually lose, we have seen this council in recent weeks take on issues that some would argue are not things that they should be taking on. It is about priorities and it is about choice. We also would urge you to think about the folks who cannot appeal. Over 55% of the residents of of New Orleans are renters and have no grounds for appeal. their rents will go up if the projected increases that the assessor has asserted are coming will impact them. You have a chance to speak for the majority of your citizens. And I would also like to remind you all, yes, there's also challenges to homeowners. There are challenges on homeowners on all sides of this. One big challenge is that today you will support locking in their rates for the next 4 years. And while there might be some confusion about how taxes are collected, we've seen that confusion happens. There's nothing to be said for the confusion of locking in rates that you cannot pay for the next 4 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll just tell you what I received. You can stay if you want
I'll
to,
read it.
but it says it's Janet Ganoha fighting to stop further displacement due to rising housing costs. New Orleans property assessments increased by an average of 23%. Now the Sewage and Water Board is pushing for a roll forward to increase our taxes. You can help by clicking the link below to send a petition to Councilmember Geruso demanding that they protect homeowners and renters by voting not to certify the tax assessment rolls this Thursday.
And that is exactly what we sent, but that is not what Councilmember Green read.
I understand, but I guess our point has been, as I explained also to you privately before the text went out, that it is a ministerial function, that we have an obligation to do this. We've learned today that the tax rolls have already been certified. It doesn't say that we aren't going to roll the millages forward. So it creates an incomplete impression is the nicest way I can say it. And hang on, when I responded to people who asked me about it, I said, what about our legal duty? And what about the fact that we won't be able to provide services to people for all the things that we want to be able to do, whether it's for housing, whether it's for homelessness, whether it's for all the social service we want to provide. I didn't get a response to that. So I guess my concern is it is not unclear. Our duty is 100% clear what we must do today. And I don't mind advocacy. We talked about this last time with doubles to dorms. We want there to be advocacy. There needs to be advocacy. We need to be pushed. This is part of a democratic process. But part of that democratic process is also being candid with the public about what we can do and what we can't.
Yes. And again, you just talked about choices that you've made and priorities that you are making. And when you talk about also conflating this entire argument that the city will have no money if you all take this step, that they will never have another nickel forever, is also kindly and something that we disagree with.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying we won't have any money, but what I'm saying is, property taxes are the second largest item after you collect sales tax and all the other taxes.
Yes.
And obviously you're going to affect all city services as a result of not being able to collect property taxes.
And
Hang on, let me finish,
Okay.
please. So I'm not saying none, but you will have significantly diminished as a result of not being able to collect.
And if people can't pay their property taxes because they can't afford them, because they have increased outrageously, the city will also see a revenue loss because they will give you nothing because they don't have it to pay. That is also a risk. And then you will lose population. This city will refuse to grow. We are talking about a slow moving disaster and another slow moving disaster.
You are right to have the debate 100%. You're just having it with the wrong body to do anything about that.
And the council can do more and should be doing more. And
I just have one more point. Hang on. I would also note that maybe uplifting the fact that the council is not rolling forward the millages would also be a good point to tell people and make sure that they know that we are going to save taxpayers tens of millions of dollars as a result of not rolling forward.
that was also in the email.
Not in the text
No,
message I
it
got.
wasn't.
It's not in the text message. I mean, I just read.
It was in the email, and we have it for it to be uplifted. Not every time it needs to be uplifted. Certainly, we can't pat you on the head every time we send something out.
I'm not asking you to pat on the head. I'm asking you to be complete. Councilmember Morel, then Green.
Honestly, I'm kind of at a loss. The reality is, on September 29th, the assessor certified the rolls. If you look at revised statute 47/1992 G1, it is clear under the law, the assessor certifies the rolls. Our role in the board review process is to review appeals and to adjust the rolls to address those appeals. What is frustrating is I appreciate that you have a different opinion from our council. One is entitled to their opinion, but not their own set of facts. The facts are, if you don't like assessments, there is an individual in the city of New Orleans who is tasked with doing assessments. That is the assessor of the city of New Orleans. What I find interesting is, if you are concerned with assessments being unfair, if you share the concerns that many people do, I would advise you to get significantly invested in the next election for assessor, because that is the person who does the assessments. What is frustrating to me is that if this council were to do what you think we can do, but we know that we cannot, if we were to not certify the rolls and the taxpayers who went through the appeals process were on the hook for $121 million of assessments, much of that, as allocated by our individual doing the review, are commercial properties, including rental property. And if those individuals lose those appeals because we did it untimely and those assessments go back up, do you believe that's fair?
Do we believe it's fair?
Are you gonna own it? If we do what you say we can do, we lose that case,
Mhm.
$121 million of relief this council could grant today goes undone and can't be remedied. And those renters who they have landlords who are fighting for relief, we're about to grant them and lose, and then it goes up. Is your office gonna correct the record and say, well, you know what, guys, we're wrong. So when your rent does go up because the relief they would have gotten in the appeals process, it can't happen now. So your rent's gonna go up because the council actually couldn't do this. The appeal your landlord sought is expired. Your rent has gone up. That's our bad. Are you gonna do that?
Yes, we would do that.
Okay, all right, that is an interesting conundrum, and I'll
You
take you at your word.
would you, I'm sorry, Councilmember Morel, where have you ever come to where have we ever given the impression that we won't say that we're wrong? If we are
Well,
in fact
I
wrong,
guess-
we have made a
I
mistake.
guess I'm struggling because Mr. DeRusso just read your text that went out to the public that completely ignored the fact that when you talk about facts, if the assessments move forward, but the millages don't roll forward, your taxes don't go up. That is a fact. And
That is
the
a
fact
You
is
only
the
control
council-
percent of the millages. The city council only controls part of the millages.
that is correct.
So
That is correct. Let me
put it
finish.
beyond your
So the council,
responsibility to do the rest of it.
has established publicly, repeatedly, that we not only advocate and are not going to roll forward city millages, we have pressured other groups to not do so. This is not about a pat on the head, it's about having a complete set of facts. And the way that your email is written, the way that your texts are written is to portray the council as this greedy, helpless body that wants your tax dollars. That is what that is the tenor, that is the facts listed in your email. You don't present a clear record. It is, I guess, on a way, and I will admit, my tone is inappropriate. I think part of the reason why many of us respond to this so negatively is that we try throughout the course of the year to have a great working relationship with a variety of nonprofits across the city. And what's increasingly frustrating is that with your organization in particular, we're not asking for a pat on the head, we're asking for you to have a complete picture. Whenever that complete picture does not suit the message you're trying to get across, this is what happens to the picture. The part that has facts that undermine the position you want to make, you omit them. And the fact that you did not include in there that the council not only is not rolling forward the millages, we have, as Councilman Druso said, why isn't your organization at the school board? Why isn't your organization at every other body that actually has not committed to not roll forward millages? Because I haven't seen, I talked to the school members, they haven't gotten emails or texts from you.
Number one, let's go back and we can answer the last question first. We are actually preparing for that. The next step is talking to all of the taxation bodies and letting the folks who have emailed you all and counted talk to you all, to talk to them next, to talk about not rolling forward. This is a part of the strategy. We had hoped that you all would take this step, and we knew that if you decided not to, then we would move on to the other organizations. That's part of our strategy. Number two, let's rolling back as well. When you mentioned the question that we portrayed you as helpless and greedy, I would push back on that. What we encouraged folks to do was to ask the city council to act in the fullness of your authority, to act on behalf of the people of Louisiana. If you are taking from that you are greedy and helpless, that is not our intention. And let me say that on the record. We do not think you are greedy and helpless. That is the point of this email. We think you can do something. We think you can act in the best interest of the people of New Orleans. We know that. So, and again, you all have a choice to make today. You will push one button or another. And we understand and have shared in emails and in communications the fullness of the story. In a text sent to remind someone who had already signed up for our process to engage with us about the email that we had already sent them, that we did not have every single detail, that we didn't replicate hundreds of words inside of a text, is unrealistic and also not indicative of how we advocate. We advocate from a full and complete knowledge base. We publish routine reports that are dozens of pages long. We engage with community to understand the fullness of their concerns, and our team does research, working with various partners to understand these issues. In the name of brevity, in the name of making sure people understand that there are choices being made, that there are decisions being made, do we boil things down? Yes, that's what most people do. But we can also have, and do often have, long conversations about these in detail because we stand on those facts. So again, I would say that that characterization is something we disagree on, and we're always happy to disagree because we realize that this has to be a conversation that can be had.
Councilmember Green.
I have an email from Housing NOLA, which was sent to its subscribers, one of whom forwarded it to me. A perfect storm is forming that will push people out of their homes and lead to mass displacement of long-term residents. Exaggerate much? Our city's culture is on the line. Exaggerate much? But some of our elected officials, like Councilman Eugene Green, believe there is no need for panic. There is no need for panic because individual groups have not made their decisions as to whether or not they're going to roll forward or hold in place their millage. At the July Economic Development and Budget Committee meeting, Councilman Green blamed, first, the use of the word blame, I may have mentioned it, blamed advocates and local news coverage for ringing their alarm, which is an opinion, on the increase in property assessments, and does not believe that residents should assume this means that they will see an increase in their property taxes. Let me make it clear on the record for everyone here. The increase in property assessments should not be allowed to be assumed that that would mean an increase in property taxes, because every other agency, if pushed by the public, could decide to not roll forward their millage. If residents shouldn't be worried about potential tax increases, why did the assessor and the council push folks so heavily to appeal their assessments? Because it is the right thing to do. Because if you disagree with your assessment, and 6,000 people disagreed with their assessments, went to the assessor and got their taxes reduced to the tune of $121,637,360. One statement is that the council could be doing more to stabilize homeowners by utilizing their regulatory power over the assessor's office if they truly believe that the assessments are inaccurate. We don't have that kind of regulatory power over the assessor. It was mentioned, we don't have the ability to go back and change all the assessments. We have a process in place that allowed 6,000 people to get their taxes reduced to the tune of $121 million. No one should assume, and in an email, it was in a press release, it was in a statement by the assessor, that increases in assessment automatically lead to increases in taxes. You can assume that because that is a fact. It is inaccurate to try to put this council on some sort of blast to try to potentially raise money off this council, suggesting that we don't understand this process. We understand the law quite clearly, quite clearly. We do not have the ability to go in and change every assessment, but boy, did we advocate for people going in to do that, to do what they feel that they can do as a public to get their assessment. And I'm proud as I sit here as a member of the city council that despite everyone asking us, what are we going to do about additional revenues next year? What are we going to do to make sure that our special interest group gets money, that we have said we are not going to increase. We are not going to roll forward those taxes. So we're held in place. As those organizations that are advocacy groups ask for more money, I'm going to be asking, where do you think we can get it from, since there was so much pressure put on us to not increase taxes? But I'm also proud of the fact that with our advocacy, because you know the city council advocates too. We are advocates in many respects. We got 6,000 people motivated to go down to the assessor's office and reduce their assessments by $121 million. That is the good news story that needs to be told more. Thank you. I look forward to the vote on this.
Thank you.
matter.
Thank you. There was nothing for me to comment on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know we have some online comments. What I asked Mr. Harang to do is call out the ones that repeat the points on our function. And there are specific emails about appeals that he's going to read. And then after that, we'll vote on both resolutions. And we'll post everything publicly so everybody can see the comments.
Thank you. There are two comments regarding specific appeals. The first is from David Kiefer. Excuse me, regarding appeal number 95986. I appealed the 418% increased assessment of my property on the basis that after 21 years and confirmation by previous assessors prior to purchase and assessment history, the building was arbitrarily reclassified as not an accessory to my home. I filled the correct forms online and submitted detailed arguments and multiple supporting exhibits as instructed. Eventually, I met with the Board of Review and OPAO representative. The two officials were not prepared and attempted to quickly read through the file and understand the basis of my appeal while also conducting the meeting, which lasted a total of 5 minutes. None of the information that I provided weeks in advance and included in my detailed analysis, tax record, assessment research, a site diagram, historical evidence, and photographs was even considered or had any impact on the outcome of the meeting. Without success, I repeatedly asked the two officials to address the actual basis of my appeal. Instead, I was offered an arbitrary reduction in the assessment of building value, which I accepted on the condition that it would not prejudice a further appeal to the Louisiana Tax Commission. I left the meeting without any confirmation of what was discussed. To date, after multiple requests for a record, I have no idea how the OPAO will represent to the Board of Review regarding this appeal. Contrary to claims made by the OPAO, the process of property assessment in New Orleans has no capacity to deal with the disposition of unique individual properties. The Board of Review hearing, which neither meets or interacts with the public, appears to simply be a rubber stamp on a crude, inaccurate, and biased method applied as a blanket shuffling the hard work of fair assessment to property owners willing and able to seek it in Baton Rouge and the LTC. And the next comment is from John Ruskin. 1, during the hearing at Delgado, the assigned hearing officer at its start heard me state that I was raising two issues, building and land values. To my surprise, the hearing officer stated we are not allowed to address the land value. I properly inferred that this was a condition applied to all contestants in hearings. This statement flabbergasted me. Based on the hearing officer's responses and questions, I correctly infer that the hearing officer followed through on that instruction. In either case, a process which generally sets prejudged outcomes is irregular and improper, rendering the process faulty and subject to rehearing. 2, I received no information about the findings and or recommendations of the hearing officer, nor from your selected presenter, the firm Harriman and Gaynor Incorporated or its representative Scott Spivey. I and all property contestants have no means to reasonably respond to the recommendations in a public setting. I urge the Board of Review to remedy the errors and reset the hearing. Regards, John Ruskin. That's the last comment regarding appeals.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the dais? Seeing none, I will move on R23-1 for approval, seconded by Councilmember Green. Members, please vote your machines. That's 5 yeas, no nays. And then on R23-2, I'll move for approval. Waiting for the machine to catch up. Thank you very much. Second by Councilmember Green. Five yeas, no nays. And at this point, I will move to adjourn. the Board of Review?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Green. Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, council members.